Sweet. 30 seconds.
Good afternoon, it's Thursday, February 1st of February. We got through 1 month down here at the Big State House. We are against Senate institutions, that's who we are. We are gonna spend some time again with Nicholas Kramer, budget analyst, Department of Finance and Management. We're gonna be talking about some parts about the capital bill, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be here again. So I would refer to the committee if there's.
We are.
For the record, Nick Kramer, Department of Finance and Management, here to continue talking about the governor's recommended capital bill adjustment, if the committee so chooses. I think we covered a lot of ground on Tuesday. I don't know that there is much in the way of outstanding points I would stress. I'm certainly happy to revisit anything that we talked about. If the committee's got questions about particular pieces, we'll just like to be a resource as I can.
I think you're very accurate. I think that we went down through and we, I think you got us on a pretty good understanding. I just, I didn't really know that it was gonna go that well, and so that we wanted to, leave room for some follow-up today. But I will leave it to the committee. Is there any parts of this that you guys want any re-explanations? Are there anything that you want to talk about? Any ideas? Anything that is gonna help you understand better?
Not really. I'm looking through, we did a pretty good deep dive with the BGS section yesterday with the commissioner and Joe Asia, and because there were some changes made from what was passed and then the governor's recommend this year. I don't know whether it'd be useful to walk through any other sections or not. AHS has, looks like two changes.
What we are gonna do, just so that you know, we are gonna start to go down through section by section. And we'll bring each respective department in. Linda, we're working on a joint section. Do you have any more? Do you have any more on that? With
Yeah, the soonest will be is week after next.
okay, so we have Commissioner Moore. We're gonna go down through. She's got some information on some dam stuff. And so she's asked to have a joint committee meeting, and it ended up going on some of that stuff. I think some of the areas of concerns that we want to do is, I know Senator Harrison's got some concerns about, not to be with Nick, but just speaking out loud, just trying to have a committee discussion while Nick's here. I know you had some concerns about the wastewater plants and the damages and also the projects that we were getting some monies for, that we were getting some federal dollars for, and any of those projects get held up. So we want to get those folks in here and find out, to answer some of those questions. Those are some of my concerns as well. We had a pretty big pot of monies that we were federal dollars that we were going to be leveraging with some monies that we had set aside.
Right.
So we're going to get those folks in. Probably going to start mirroring pretty much what the House does. If they do something on one point done, we'll get them in here. And I imagine at some point in time, these sheets are going to start to change a little bit as things get moved around. Is that correct, Nick?
I could even speak to that, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Based on the testimony that I sat in on in your House counterparts committee this morning, I believe one formatting change you can expect is at the direction of the chair, Joint Fiscal Office, Scott Moore, who I believe is the resource from Capitol Bill, did some reorganizing to this spreadsheet to take all the cash fund projects, which are currently separate in section 18, and adding some additional columns in the sheet to embed those in the cases where there's a project that is both bonded, there's a bonded dollar appropriation and a cash fund appropriation. Those would now show up together.
And they did run that by me before they did that, and I was aware of that, and I thought it'd be a good idea, so.
For the record, the administration is also enthusiastically supportive of it. That's actually the format we originally presented the capital bill in last year. And then I gathered with the cash fund changes, they've got pulled out into a section, so it works for us too. Scott and I have had some conversations.
Have they done that yet? Are those sheets available?
I believe they're posted to the House Corrections and
Okay, maybe we could get a copy of all of that
And
stuff.
also Scott, will be in here, next week, early next week.
Okay, so maybe when he can bring those in when he comes in.
So, Mr. Chair, while you were talking, I did think of there's sort of two things
Yep.
on the list that I didn't go through, that are kind of more technical and granular in nature. If it pleases the committee, we could take advantage of
Well,
the
let's
time
go.
to do that.
Yep, yes.
I just have a general question. Just I noticed that Michael Harrington is coming in and the way I've seen him is in economic development and a series of really challenging IT projects. IT, some consider to be capital.
I think for the purposes of recent state appropriations, those projects like the unemployment insurance modernization, if that's what you're.
Yeah,
referring to,
that's one of the things.
Those have been funded generally in the operating budget, not.
No, I understand. That's why I see them in economic development.
Right.
But I just wanna throw that out.
Right, and then,
Because at some point, we might wanna think about capitalizing them because they're millions of dollars. And,
So-
yeah, hopefully,
Those-
more than a
those
five-year
are the
life.
decisions that are made that are above us.
Right. Well-
Like $50 million, just for an instance, if you wanna talk about a big expense, $50 million. That did with the transportation, with the DMV software was $50 million. And even though it was going into a building that we are basically in charge of, it was through the DMV fund, and so we never saw any of that, so.
Right, well, something it could be capital in the DMV fund too. Like all capital isn't necessarily here either. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yep.
Do we have you must have a written statement of what goes in the capital bill and probably what the cash fund is for?
In terms of like statutory uses,
Yeah,
Senator,
yeah.
yeah, there's the statute.
Or maybe it's in our book.
I don't know that the statutory reference is immediately there. I'm happy to follow up. There's a couple different sections that deal with the capital bill generally and what falls in under the umbrella of capital spending. Cash fund has its own statute that governs the uses. The short, plain English summary is that the cash fund, well, there's the two sub-accounts. Sub-account A can generally be used for anything that you would, any capital projects, the same way. There's parity between cash fund and bonded dollar appropriations. And then the second sub-account has broader uses that include that.
Like the IIJA stuff.
Right,
Or
or essential investments, reserves.
it's like
things that-
super secret reserves, not the secret part, but.
Well,
You know,
it's to put the monies in to draw down the federal dollars.
right, but it's kind of a higher level of protection. It's an increased level of protection.
Okay, it's something that, I don't think, and Nick, you could probably, tell us different, but I don't think any of those funds could be not withstood. In that in that B account.
I would have to defer ultimately to Ledge Council, Mr. Chair. I believe the legislature has the authority as the final law writing body to not withstand anything they want. That being said, yeah, I would also defer in terms of intended cash fund B uses to your colleagues across the hall whose idea
Yeah.
it was, 'cause
Totally, but that's my understanding,
Okay.
and I just think it's a new concept, so it's just good to document things like that.
Yeah.
Be clear about our intent, I think.
So what would you like to talk about, sir?
Well, so I was, if it pleases you, Mr. Chair, the two things I just wanted to make sure I touched on last time. I believe we spent some time talking about the reallocations and the bond issuance costs and how those all roll back onto the bottom line. And I think I highlighted, so this is on line 173 of the spreadsheet. I just wanted to make sure I underscored, so there is $640,000 of on that bottom line. That represents available revenues over spending. So we are not, there's $640,000 for which the governor is not proposing immediately any uses, and which we felt we left to the jurisdiction of the House and this committee to decide what to do with those dollars.
I imagine those decisions are starting to be made in the House side.
I imagine they will have a proposal. I had to bet my own money. So I just wanted to draw the committee's attention to that. And again, the reason why those are there, which is maybe somewhat unusual in the grand scheme of things, is the late breaking conversations about the Waterbury Armory that this committee heard about yesterday. Originally, we were looking for additional capital reallocations to be able to fund a portion of the military's costs, and then based on conversations, we decided to go in a different direction. But since we went through that exercise of redetermining allocation, we thought, well, let's present that to the committees, since those are funds we have determined we won't need. So that's where those are coming
Thank you.
from. And I think VGS may be able to testify to there being an additional cash fund appropriation that may have some additional capacity as well. That's not reflected in the spreadsheet, but I'm just flagging that.
So you do not need the 640,000 for the armory.
No, Senator, that's correct. We have an alternative funding proposal there. So then the last thing I just thought, since I'm here and if the committee's got time, just to highlight a couple pieces of the language. The language generally, which should be in your booklet under, forget the section.
Bill language?
Bill language, I would do it.
Cool.
It's almost like somebody knows what they're doing, so.
Yeah.
So generally, this committee, I'm sure will be familiar with the format, having gone through the capital bill last year. The first handful of sections all correspond to the spreadsheets. These are just the legal words versions of the appropriations. So all these numbers should tie up. Section 2 is VGS, section 3 human services, and so on. Since this is capital bill adjustment, every section does not show up, just the sections for which we are proposing amendments. So that's why you'll see section 2, state buildings, scratch outs, underlines. There's no section, there's section 3, section 4. It's a little bit confusing, right? Because the sections of the capital bill adjustment go sequentially. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, but the prior sections that they're actually amending may or may not correspond. So up through section 4 of the current capital bill adjustment, which reads section 4, 2023 acts and resolves number 69, section 4 is amended to read. The two sections align, but then starting the next section, if the committee follows me, section 5 of the adjustment is actually amending section 10 of the original bill. So that's a potential for confusion. I think I just want to flag this. And the spreadsheet, to the degree it's helpful, we've attempted to do kind of a crosswalk to track that. I think the first leftmost columns show the original section numbers on the right-hand side, and then proposed adjustments on the left. So as the committees review the spreadsheet, that may be helpful. So sections 5 is clean water, 6 is Department of Labor, section 7 of the adjustment in the language for reallocation, so amending section 16. And then there's a section 8 of the capital bill adjustment, which is amending section 17 of the original bill. Section 17 of the original bill is where the state treasurer is given authorization to issue general obligation bonds in accordance with CDAC. And then, as is the convention for capital bill adjustments, there's an additional authorization we're adding here on the order of 5.2 million. That corresponds to the bond agreement that we discussed the other day.
Yep.
So that's just necessary to make sure that they can use that. Then section 9 of the adjustment, which is amending section 18 of the original bill. This is where we are proposing to strike the entirety of section 18 as originally worded, and we're basically reinserting it with a couple of organizational groups. It just gets kind of complicated when you're striking out and moving things around. So we did a strike all on that. Ostensibly, there's no changes in the appropriations, except for those that are highlighted on the spreadsheet. There's two small cash fund appropriations, but basically what this section does is reorders and slightly reorganizes the cash fund appropriations to take, as I stated before, everything that we felt was a capital project authorized out of cash fund last year, regardless of the bill it was carried in, and moves those all into the current bill. And so I'll leave that there. I know that's an ongoing discussion, but that's what that section does. Some reorganization of the subsections to make sure that all of the cash fund A appropriations are in one subsection, then all of the cash fund B appropriations are in another. So that's our attempt to try to clarify. So that section runs for several pages. And then section, and it's a highlighted double X. And that's just in recognition of the fact that, this bill language is likely to change significantly in both committees, so we didn't want to presume any language sections. We left that blank. That's for our pledge council to update. But amending sections 22, sale of properties, we are here adding language regarding the sale of 108 Cherry Street. And without getting too deeply into this, I think this is something BGS might be able to testify to in more depth. I'll just say at a high level, this subsection 3 that we're adding would allow from the sale of the proceeds of 108 Cherry Street, the state to pay off some internal debts that are sort of sitting on the books with regards to that property. We have a number of internal service funds in the state that help fund the ongoing operations and maintenance of certain buildings. What happened here is that services were performed for 108 Cherry Street by other state entities, accruing a debt basically that building owned that would have been paid through the occupants of the building. Since there are no more occupants, that debt, there's nobody to pay that. So what we're hoping to do here is when we sell the property, use the first 6.2 million of the proceeds to pay that off.
You have to anyways, right? You have to pay it off to clearly kind of.
Exactly.
Well, it's not debt to a bank, it's my understanding, it's debt
It's internal
to,
debt. And
so it's like BGS charges something.
It's like paying back your brother.
Yeah,
What?
hopefully your brother didn't charge you too much.
one hopes, Senator, yes, absolutely. And I will say, one of the reasons we try to pay off our internal debts whenever we can is they do show up in the state's act for the annual comprehensive financial report as liabilities.
Okay, good.
So in the same universe of things
Yeah.
that for instance, CDAC looks at, or the rating agencies, those
Yeah.
show as a debt that we're carrying, so it's important that we make those whole. The next double highlighted, double X section, which is, yeah.
Is that okay? Just because this is an interesting concept. I mean, totally funds should pay each other. How, that seems like a lot to me, 6 million. Are there others that have that level of debt, other properties?
I think, Senator, and again, this is where I would defer to BGS for a definitive answer. I think that represents many years of maintenance and services that were not being able to be covered by occupants, either because of non-occupancy or not full occupancy. So you think about maybe very back in the napkins.
We spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on this building, thousands of
Yeah.
dollars on this building. Millions, actually, let's not even
Well,
go
yeah.
millions. And one of the reasons why it was even before your guys' time, it was just like when this opportunity comes, we had to be, maybe we still need to be. We had to be so careful about the amount of money that we were spending on this building that we had to keep that tamp down. Why they even wanted to even talk about having the sale process go forward. There's nobody in state government that I'm aware of that's gonna be upset that we don't hold 108 Cherry Street anymore.
Oh, and I'm not,
But I'm just saying
It's
that
just
for the level of
interesting,
debt to
yeah.
where it could be, to only see $6.2 million worth of level of debt on this building at this point in time, pretty exciting. Because at other times before, we were talking just even to keep on inhabiting the building, I think in last year's capital bill, it was $13-17 million that we had clawed back from that one, that that we were planning to put into that building. Just to get it to a level of quietcy or whatever, so, to only see $6.2 million on that building is pretty exciting.
That's interesting. So then that is almost our minimum price maybe, but I know that'll be a BGS type question.
Yeah, please.
And then if we didn't get 6.2 for it, we just, write off that debt somehow. I mean, there's not another place we could take it from, right?
Yeah, I think we would have to investigate alternative mechanisms to make that.
Oh, yeah, so,
It might be a one-time payment or something. And at this point, wouldn't be prepared to say definitively we would write off the debt. I think we would have to investigate if there's other sources.
Yeah.
Because essentially, my understanding is that there's services performed, expenses accrued to, for instance, BGS,
Sure.
that this is essentially reimbursement, so they're carrying.
Oh, no, I understand. I think it's a good concept. I'm just curious.
But
about
yeah.
okay, so we have our new sheets from this point forward, these are the ones we'll work with.
You want one of these things?
I've got it online, so
Okay.
thank you.
My
Yeah.
things are with that now.
These are, yes. that
Yeah,
was-
we don't have to wait for your white letters.
I know, I stand humble in front of the committee, you know.
No, the green's nice.
Yeah.
It's hard to read the red now, but stop.
Have to make things very colorful, but backfiring. So, if, maybe I'll just continue
Yeah,
quickly
please,
with the language.
please.
So, the next section, we are proposing some amendments to 32 VSA 1001B. This is the statute that governs the cash fund for capital investments. So, Senator Harrison, to your question, if you were looking for eligible uses of the cash fund, this was the place to look. Specifically, we are proposing two amendments here. The first one I would describe as substantive, and the second really pretty technical. The first one occurs it's in subsection B1 and B1. Current law says that the capital infrastructure sub-account, which is what I call cash fund A, may consist of transfers made by the General Assembly of 4% or less of the last completed fiscal year's general fund appropriations, et cetera. That's current law. We are proposing to change that to shall consist of annual transfers made by the General Assembly of 4% of the last completed fiscal years. This is that codification to transfer that I've spoken to, I think, at length. So there it is in language. And then farther down in that same subsection A, we're adding the words, I'll read the whole sentence. Less the amount necessary to fund the state's general obligation debt service in the year for which the transfer is being made, as determined by the state treasurer and the commissioner of finance and management. And we're adding the phrase at the time of budget preparation. And really, that's just to clarify that this 4% transfer, which is a snapshot in time, right, of the estimated debt service, it's codifying when we do that calculation, which kind of common sense says we do it at the time of budget preparation. What we were trying to avoid is an interpretation where somebody could say, well, because occasionally there is an update to the debt service estimate in the BAA when more information is available. We didn't want a situation where somebody said, well, do we have to claw back some of that 4%? So this is just establishing the time that the calculation happens.
Has anybody had these discussions yet across the hall that you're allowed to say?
I believe that as far as I know, Senator, the appropriations committees are aware that this is what we're proposing. I have not had an explicit conversation with any of the members, and I can't speak for Adam, but like our intention is to communicate this as a priority as we.
Yeah, and I think it's challenging to bind the future legislature, so we'll see what happens.
Right, Senator. So yeah, I think that's a point that we have heard a lot. I think we don't see this, I mean, statute in general, codified statute establishes laws that exist in perpetuity. That until the legislature chooses to amend them, they are bound by. I think, but specifically, there's a prohibition on binding a future legislature to make certain appropriations.
Yes.
Something, what this is saying, to be clear, and I'm really glad you raised that, because I think it's an important point, is that this is an annual mechanism, a component of the budget that will exist moving forward. There are other examples of this, like the budget stabilization reserves, the 5% amount that goes to those.
Right.
I've commented to a number of people that, you know, the legislature being the legislature always retains the power to notwithstand language. So one concern I think that's been voiced as well, just if we're locking ourselves into 4%, what if we have a bad revenue year, right? And I would respond that in a bad revenue year, you do, I mean, nothing is permanent, right, in the legislature. And so I think this isn't really shackling or binding a future legislature so much as sending a more consistent and kind of committed message that this cash fund transfer is something that collectively we all think is a good idea.
So we bind future legislatures all the time, and we just do. We bind them in every time of, as far as monies, and this is what we do and all of that. I mean, you look at, okay, all the money that goes, that we collect on the sales tax, that goes to the ed fund, or whatever, and they always have these little percentages. I know that, in, home sales, the tax that's paid during home sales, a certain percentage goes over here, a certain percentage goes over there. We just made a rule on cannabis sales about how much goes to education and all of that. So it's not like, it's not new that we bind future legislators all the time, and the notwithstand provision enables you to claw that back. So it's not like we're doing something that's not done in this building all the time. And so the only time that you hear that argument is when somebody wants to use that argument. I mean, oh, we can't bind future legislators. Well, we do. We do it all the time. And it doesn't mean that the future legislature has to abide by it.
Certainly appreciated you raising the point, Senator, because I think it's a good nuance to unpack and potentially the source of some misunderstanding from our perspectives. So that's, I think, the bulk of the cash fund changes. There's nothing else we're proposing in statute there. The next section, I think John spoke to this a little bit in our initial presentation, so I won't dwell particularly long. This is the change that the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation requested. It has to do with allowing them to rely on professional engineering services that are available within the Agency of Natural Resources, which is sort of in alignment with their current practice. A number of years ago, I gather there was a change to statute that required FPR to check in with DGS for those same services. Since then, the capacity of ANR has increased pretty dramatically, so now they're basically relying on doing it in-house in ANR. We've run this by DGS, they're fine with it, they feel like this reflects current practice. So this is what I would describe as a technical change. And then the effective date. So that, I'll pause there on language if that anybody has some questions.
I do have one line item. Forgive me if you went over this and I just wasn't paying good enough attention. Line 179 on the new spreadsheet.
Okay.
Is the Office of State Treasurer bond issuance costs.
Yes,
Is this a new item this year, correct?
that's correct.
Is this the baby bond?
No, this is not related to the baby bonds.
Okay.
What this is, and I may have spoken to it, I may not have, so I'm glad you brought it up. Prior to 2024, our practice for paying for bond issuance costs, so the fee to the underwriter, the fee to bond counsel, everything that goes into the actual preparation of our bonds for issuance. We were paying out of kind of a haircut methodology is what we called it. So every capital appropriation that was made, 10 million here, 5 million here, the departments weren't actually receiving those full amounts. A little small percentage off the top of every one was going towards the cost of bond issuance. And we, based on advice from bond counsel, who took a look at our practices and said, this really isn't common practice anymore. It's much more common to just have a direct appropriation for bond issuance costs and then leaving the capital appropriations intact. So based on that advice, we switched in 2024. The operating budget has a line item now for bond issuance costs. So what this $1.148 million represents is the residual balance that was sitting in the fund that prior to where we've been funneling those haircuts. And based on estimated amounts, we had some leftover on that fund balance bottom line. That since we've moved to a new system, we just weren't gonna need that anymore. So we figured these are effective for the allocation.
And that will change year to year, probably.
So hopefully that's the last this committee should see of that particular item, because what we've basically done is cleaned out that fund. And there's no balance moving forward. Bond issuance costs do change year to year, depending on a number of factors. But I think largely those changes will be reflected in that line item above them.
Okay, great.
That's interesting.
Little technicality,
Yeah, and I actually had assumed that it would be a recurring expense, so that's helpful.
so this is just a one-time, which I think is actually, to the point that we've made earlier, right, about, how little funding is available this year. I mean, without that, right, the total amount of reallocations will be only about $1 million.
Yeah.
Right, and then the 5.2 for premium, which if committee members are curious and look back in the historical record, even last capital bill adjustment, I think we had more like 12 million in premium. So these are comparatively small rates, so to speak.
So, and maybe you said this already, this was going to make it easier to see the cash project, so is that,
I believe that's the intention, yes, so
that's real,
those would be out.
so,
So if committee members are looking at this new spreadsheet that Scott put together, and I hate to put words in Scott's mouth, but I did just hear his explanation upstairs. So the changes that he's made are to take all of the appropriations that were in section 18, which is the cash fund section, green spreadsheet. And he's deleted that whole section where those appropriations show up is in new columns in each of the other sections. You can see, like, I'm at the top of this spreadsheet. There's FY '24 bonded, FY '24 cash. So in the case where a cash fund appropriation was for the same project that there was a bonded appropriation, he's moved that cash fund appropriation up next to that so that they can show in the same line. And the totals give a total across two funding sources. So I think that's,
and they're also the blue ones.
and
And
they
they're
would
highlighted in blue to
change.
show us, that's great.
Right, it's really.
Yeah, that's very helpful, now, do we know which one is cash one and cash two?
That, Senator, I'm not sure is obviously evident. I
was A and B, or A and B, sorry.
I think, so I'm back at our original spreadsheet, so. Maybe a future improvement for this spreadsheet, if you look in your booklets, under the tab that says cash fund crosswalk. There's, I think I've highlighted this before, this was our attempt, there's some text about the cash fund, and then there's another sort of spreadsheet looking thing at the
Yeah.
end. One more page, I think here.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is where we listed every cash fund appropriation that was made last year, regardless of the bill source. So on the first page, it shows Act 69. On the second page, it shows Act 78. Act 69 is the capital bill, Act 78 is the operating budget. The first columns give the as passed, and the second columns give what we are proposing to do in terms of restructuring. So, and then the very.
Oh, I
first
see, then
column
you
says
have
the
this
second.
B in this.
So that would be my best reference at this point to sort out which is which.
So it looks like all the AOT stuff was in B. I was just looking at the language, because this, this language was done after this committee was done with our budget. I think this was done by the appropriations
Right,
folks, so I don't think we've seen this yet.
so there,
I mean, other than getting this,
this is a great clarification, I think, Senator. So jumping back to the language that the section that I walked through that amends section 18. What we've done, I'll just go into a little bit more detail. What we've done mostly, I'd say 80 to 90% of the new section we have is just a restatement of what was section 18 in the capital bill, except there's some language shifts where the capital bill says, well, this project is authorized in FY 24. Our language says this amount is appropriated, right? Which is that distinction that we've talked about several times where we feel like appropriations should be made here versus authorizations. Since authorizations aren't really backed by funding, right? And what we saw with the $10 million is that it got appropriated elsewhere. So notwithstanding the authorizations made in the capital bill, there actually wasn't funding. So again, and I won't reiterate that whole argument, but so we're changing the language to, instead of saying authorized, we're changing it to say appropriated. And then in a couple instances, and I think Senator Harrison, you picked up on one of them, there were appropriations made in the operating budget, mostly out of cash fund B, in fact, I think entirely out of cash fund B, that were capital in nature. They were capital projects, we felt, but they never, because I think, like you said, deliberations happened maybe after the passage of the capital bill, they never showed up in the capital. So part of our philosophical construct here is that capital projects should live in the capital bill. We were pulling those items back from the operating budget, putting them in the capital. So there's no new projects there. There's just projects that have already been appropriated just in other legislation.
I like this new layout a lot better.
but this,
So I think probably that, yeah, I like the new layout.
yeah, I like the layout better too, but this language is new to this committee.
Right,
So I think it's just worth going through at some point. I mean, when I'm noticing, so there's an A and a B account, right? And then there's a section on how to use the funds,
right.
which is pretty important.
So this is, which section? Did we look at? Oh, this is
It
the,
doesn't have a section number yet.
this is just amending, so this is, I'm talking mostly about these.
Yeah, I'm talking about this because this is going. I mean, we've established these accounts with some thought,
Right,
but it was a pretty quick thought. So I just think it's worth looking at this language because this is what's going to continue.
right, so that section that's amending 32 VSA 1001B, the vast majority of that is what is currently in statute.
Right, but it was done last year,
Right,
at
this
the
is,
end of last year.
right, so the committee members would have only seen it in the context of the budget big bill, which,
We may not have.
so it may be helpful to review. I'll posit that what's on the page, with the exception of the things that we are proposing to change, those, the codification of the 4% and that little timing piece. This kind of represents the original proposal, at least cash fund A does, and sets up the cash fund to work as it's been intended to.
Yeah,
Breaking conditions.
so we have capital infrastructure account, which is number 1, that we've been calling A, but I think we should just call it the CIS or something. But it's the capital infrastructure sub account.
You can go fight with Jane about that.
No, but I just think it's important that we see this because that's where the 4% comes from.
Right, correct.
And then other infrastructure, capital fund 2, or extra capital fund 2. The B is 2,
B is 2, yeah.
or 2 headed, whatever. So, and that's other infrastructure essential investments and reserve sub account. And that one it looks like it has a little bit more constraints on the revenue. Although there's no minimum, but then use of money, that C is not. The C, use of funds money in the funds account shall only be used as follows. That is for both 1 and 2, right?
I think if you look further down, Senator, so C sub 1 describes cash fund A, and then C sub 2 describes the uses for cash fund B.
Okay, cool, that makes more sense. And so then tangible capital investment seems to be lifespan 20 years or more, that's reasonable. Engineering and architectural costs directly associated, probably that's language that you have before.
So my understanding is the intention with cash fund A was to just create parity with anything you could spend bonded dollars on, you could spend cash fund A. So it's
Yeah.
capital projects essentially, either investments that have a 20-year lifespan or engineering and architectural costs.
That are associated with those investments.
I think that's the intention there. And then cash fund B, I think you're probably about to point out, has a larger universe. We have observed in our office that, and so it sub 2 sub A says any expenditure under subdivision 1, so
Right.
basically anything you can use A for, you can use B for. And then in B, it says any other essential investments in infrastructure needs, including transportation related projects, and capitalization for revolving loan funds. And that's a very broad.
Yeah, so capital B, which was intended to be a tighter group amount of funding, is actually, I would say, a less tight.
What do you mean by tighter?
Like that was supposed to be money that's harder to spend. Or more protected, was my understanding of it.
I don't think so.
It was, that was the money for the IIJ, for the match, that we don't wanna touch.
Again, I wouldn't feel super comfortable speaking on behalf of the Senate
Yeah,
appropriation.
no, I understand, but that's my understanding of it, is that was gonna be the more protected fund, I'll just say that. Like,
Okay.
because that's why we had an A and a B. Was, I mean, otherwise you don't need it to,
I certainly agree with your assessment, Senator, that the eligible uses out of cash fund B are broader than cash fund A.
yeah, including transportation related, which is another fund, which I just, from a fund account perspective, I just object to that, but quite tough for me. But I just think somebody should say that.
I think it's fair for me to reiterate that the administration's focus and concern is entirely around cash fund A, which is our original proposal.
That's where our rub is.
And cash fund B, I will say the one thing about cash fund B is in the legislative construct, that's where the IIJA match wound up being reserved. And appropriations actually were made for the initial parts of the IIJA match. Those are certainly administrative priorities. In our governor's recommended capital bill construct, those were just made as one-time general fund investments. They got moved into this cash fund B. To the degree that they're in there, and we really care about those things. We think those are great investments. We're very happy about that.
I think those are great investments too.
Ongoing future of cash fund B is not something that keeps me up at night personally. Yeah.
Okay, what else? We kept Nick here, a little bit, anything else?
If there's no other questions from committee members on language, I would just take a final opportunity to reorient to things that are in the booklet. There's this very short but sweet report from the Clean Water Board, which is in response to a request that was made in the Capitol Bill last year's Act 69, Section 10F. This has to do with the $4 million that was taken, reallocated from the Clean Water Board placeholder. There was $10 million in the governor's recommended construct, and then that was dropped to $6 million. And so this committee and your House counterpart asked for a report saying, well, how are we gonna fund difference? How are we gonna backfill? And so this is just a Clean Water Board formally saying we're going to use the time to Clean Water Fund surplus. There's the text on the cash fund history and investments that I think I've spoken to at great length here. There's the CAF Fund crosswalk. Hopefully that's a helpful tool. I guess I would leave there, the HVAC report, since that's sort of the major project that we were able to fund beyond backfilling the 10 million. So we can go into some detail about that and the ADA compliance, just to give you these comments. That's the bulk of it. I'm happy to answer any other miscellaneous questions.
I think we're gonna move on just for today.
Okay.
I want to thank you for coming in and,
Yeah, as always.
you've been very, very helpful. Give us the understand this. We're gonna have some more questions. I know that. And, appreciate it very much, Nick.
All right, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to keep you a little bit. We've got a little long over this, work, but it's not a few other things. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And, looks like we're gonna talk today about, Department of Labor's HVAC system, and who would like to lead it off?
I can give a brief synopsis and then toss it to the professionals.
Commissioner, glad to have you here.
Thank you for having us. For the record, Mike Harrington, Commissioner, Department of Labor. This is actually a continuation of a project that was already approved. And BGS is here with us along with Chad Wozniak. He's our CFO at the Department of Labor. So the original project was to replace the heating system, the cooling system, and the electrical system. And then if there were other funds left over to upgrade some of the restrooms on the main floor so that they were ADA accessible. The problem is that this project was originally created pre-pandemic. A lot has changed in the world since the pandemic, including the cost. So what you have really is an additional allocation request that would just allow us to complete the project. I learned from Tay this morning from BGS, we have the equipment and we'll be beginning the project once the heating system season is over.
Okay, does this have a line item in our bill already?
It's in the Department of Labor section.
Okay, Department of Labor, okay.
Where is this started building?
The building is our Montpelier office, which is right along the on-ramp where if you would turn left up to National Life, you
Yeah.
turn right and that big industrial looking box that was built by the federal government back in the 1960s is the Department of Labor.
Congratulations.
Right next to the high school.
Oh, next slide. Okay, so did you have flooding?
39. We had some minor flooding on the ground floor, so we took on a few inches of water and mud. So we've been remediating that as well. It's a 1960s building. The feds bought it. They or built it. They needed to receive it for workforce development and unemployment insurance programs, but they don't pay them. So the state does own the building. But it was originally constructed by the Department of Labor.
And
It's
did
141.
FEMA pay for the?
We're going through that process now. I think our assumption is that they will.
We're in the spreadsheet, Kate, that might be, it doesn't align.
141, is that what you said?
I think it's-
141, yeah.
Yeah, it's 1.5.
Is it Green Mountain Drive?
1.5, 400, I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
And that's the difference between what was originally expected construction cost.
And there are slides I know that BGS has submitted that gives just a little bit of what's been spent, what's encumbered, and then what's remaining. So the next slide over, and I don't want to speak for BGS, we presented on it this morning. So
Definitely, yeah.
so you see the prior funding was the 1.9, the encumbered, the expended, and then our new request is to add 1.5 on top of 1.9.
It's a new boiler.
This project started when? Back in,
Well, we went through a planning phase, which took about a year, and then so that was right around the start of the pandemic.
It was 2019.
Yeah.
Funding.
So 2019 was when we did the planning, and then things turned sideways. But I know Tay and his team have continued to work on
think you said you ordered, even the equipment took a year to get.
Right, we ordered the chillers and the boilers just about this time last year.
Yeah.
The chillers have been delivered to the contractor and I have paid for the equipment at this point. I'm waiting for the bill for the boiler. And as Commissioner stated, as soon as we shut the boilers off, in 1960, asbestos was a wonderful product. We used it for sound insulation on the ceiling of the mechanical room. So we've got to remove that so we actually can demo the pipes and have a place to hang the new stuff. As soon as the asbestos is gone, we'll be installing the new boilers and the chiller.
So the additional FYI 25 request will finish the project.
FY 25 request will actually do the electrical service, which I don't have under contract at this point in time. I have numbers for, excuse me, the construction manager. But because we didn't have enough funds available to actually encumber the money that didn't exist,
Right.
delayed that portion of the project.
But it was part of the original
It was
stuff.
part of the original.
Right. I guess that, being honest with you, I'm just surprised it's not more. I mean, we saw the delays because of the supply chains and what it did for the projects here, just in this side of the State House. And, it just seemed like that, every time it was a million, it was a million, it was a million. So, I mean, you started this project in 2019 and you're only to that point right now. So, yeah. Yes.
Chad, is that number likely to change, or, because you said you haven't actually ordered it yet? The electrical piece?
Right, so I inflated the electrical number by 20%.
Ah,
So that I can
so
anticipate
you
the
got something
fact that,
built in?
yes. And then any balance that's left over from the electrical would be going to the ADA upgrades on the restrooms.
Commissioner, why we got you here, flooding over there, any flooding over there?
We did have minor flooding in the ground floor, so we took on it, and this is actually the first time it's flooded in recent known history. So usually we have, it's flooded the other side of the riverbank, not this side, across from us. So, we took on a few inches in the basement of, water, mud. We were quick to, get as much of that out as we could. We had contractors in within a day. So we actually didn't have to evacuate the building. We had it reviewed both by WorkSafe and some other folks who said that they, the initial remediation meant that there wasn't standing water and sludge in there. So we were able to keep staff working, and we had contractors in pulling out drywall, and so we've got flooring that's come up, we've got drywall, we've got some, so as Tay was talking, that the chiller and the boiler feed into a system of piping that go into different heating and cooling units in each room on each floor. Right, so there's probably, I think we counted them once, but it was over 100 or, like 65 or 70 or something like that. So, they're little blower units that attach along the wall, either the cold, water or the hot water goes through the pipes.
Yeah.
So we have a series of those in the basement that had to be replaced. That was probably the biggest part of the project because, the piping goes down through the cement. So we had to have a vendor come in and detach them so we took the opportunity to replace the drywall behind them with like cement board, so it wasn't, we could remove the bad drywall and put in something that wasn't permeable. So the work continues in the sense that our workers' compensation division works out of the basement ground floor, so they are displaced at the moment. They're using an alternative space. But right now we're waiting on furniture and new carpet. Flooring to go down.
We're gonna send other departments over there to show them how to bring us good news.
Yeah,
And,
we'll do our best.
Yeah, so if you can educate them on how to do that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, just where's your computer system?
The computer, well, we have many different computer systems.
Well, where are the ones
The
that-
UI
The
computer
ones that
system.
I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the UI computer system actually pre-pandemic was moved off-site to a third-party vendor. So the system, while it uses the old code and everything, it's on newer hardware. And there is a redundancy in a backup system. So it's part of the ADS data, the
virtual data center that they have is housed, I think, in Massachusetts or Connecticut. So, yeah, it used to be in the building at Park Labor and was relocated.
That's good, that's it. And are you Tay?
I'm telling you.
Nice to meet you. You are, a lot of people depend on you. Your name is often mentioned, always in a good way in these meetings.
Good to hear.
We depend on them too.
It's always, Tay said this, Tay said that.
So, Commissioner,
And we
you
just
mentioned
take it.
the end of the heating season, is that like April, May?
So to my understanding, and Tay can jump in here, is that you have to wait till the boiler stops running before we can remove the asbestos.
That's up to Mother Nature.
Yeah, yeah.
Historically, it's around the beginning of May. One of the reasons why we chose to do the chiller and the boiler at this point in time, the boiler itself is the same age I am. I rebuilt it in the 90s, so it's on its second 30-year life cycle. It failed 3 years ago. We've been renting a chiller that sits out in front of the building each summer. So that's why I felt that was a very important one to get in with the money that we had available. And of the 2 boilers that they have down in the boiler room, one of them is not functioning. So I thought that would be the other thing. The electricity at this point in time is working fine, so we delayed that in hopes of getting enough money to actually finish the project.
But I assume it's not like changing a tire, this will take a little bit of time.
Correct.
All summer, a year, 2 years?
It will be this summer,
Oh. That's great.
so they'll have brand new boilers to be able to start next
Yeah.
year. Obviously, because we have to wait till the heating season to get rid of the asbestos. We will have the rental chiller for a little while at the beginning of the summer till we get the new system up, we get the bugs worked out of it, and then it'll go away and we'll be on permanent system.
Perfect. That's great.
Committee, anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, it's great news. Yeah, we don't see, news like that all the time, so that's all good, so.
Don't ask me about unemployment.
No,
I can't guarantee.
No,
We'll
no,
do that soon.
That's gonna stay,
Yeah, you had the dashboard, which is.
we've seen a few of the struggles, so, thank you for coming in, appreciate it very much, keep up the great work. So, if you got anything else that, you need to tell us, just let us know, we're here.
Terrific. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon.
Did I forget anything?
Thanks.
Okay, committee, we're gonna, get a little bit of time, I think.
I can ask Stevie to come a little earlier.
Yeah, see if he can come a little bit earlier, and we'll wait to hear on that, and,
Hey, Chris.
yeah, well, of course, absolutely.
Are we? at a
We got
break or
the,
not?
we'll just see what Linda said. Then, so we have the Waterbury Harbor coming in, Commissioner Chris Winters didn't get a chance to come in the other day, so we're gonna let him come in and have his say. And, make sure that thing is still going along the path of no resistance and, go from there.
I think he's testifying right now,
Okay,
so he's found everything.
well, why don't we take a break until, take him, 15 minutes probably to get down here, would you say?
Okay, so till 25 to,
Unless you were already typing a message out.
well, I said that we're ready now,
Okay,
and
let's
I
just
haven't
do,
heard back.
oh yeah, well, why don't we just take a couple more minutes, we'll be patient.
We could just tune into the meeting and see when he's done.
Yeah.
You can watch it. Power of technology.
One thing I'm learning, when they have these geothermal systems, I didn't realize you needed that many wells.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The one had 180 wells, one of them.
And there was some other with like
And that's
4,000 wells.
24 wells. Yeah. I'd like to see one of those. Do we have any?
We, the new list in police barracks is on geothermal and the White River Junction River House renovation, I believe they were testing.
That's the
geo-
24 wells, I think, right?
There's one other that I'm forgetting. Okay, River Valley. Do you know how big these are? Are these like a pushing and stand them kind of wells or 500 feet deep?
That's really,
Are they really wide or are they just little?
they're probably, I mean, I would say, yeah, it would just be cool.
And each one needs like a dig safe flag, like it just amazes me that you have that much
Oh,
crap on your
probably
flag, but
just have
whatever.
the dig safe people be there.
Can't do it for it. It's yeah, 4,000 wells.
Well, they stick out too.
Well, they,
Yeah.
Why so many wells, Kate, do you know?
I think you just wanna be really sure that you know what you're gonna hit when you deliver it, once they talk about the test wells. And then-
So are they allowing, so that's, of course, they're bringing that water up, it's 50-degree water probably. So they're squeezing they're squeezing the energy units out of that water. And are they allowing that water to go back down into the ground and recover naturally before they pull it back up again? Would you say that that's how it would be, or?
Do not want me
I-
answering this
I
question.
No problem.
Get you
I
over your
think it is a
point.
loop,
Yeah,
I think you're right, but if we, I mean, I don't know, but that would actually.
I mean, we can have somebody in.
If you
talk
have
about
somebody
that.
in to
Yeah, we can,
understand.
that'd be
That'd be
fun,
great.
yeah,
That
we
would
can
touch
do that.
it, yeah.
We'll talk to maybe you can talk to somebody for us.
I'm emailing Joe right now to let him know that there's interest in this topic.
Yes, sounds good.
I never knew what BGS would be so smart. I mean, these guys are
Incredible.
amazing.
They are. So fun fact about Tay is he trained when Lauren, who's our program chief under Joe, was an intern 20 years ago. She trained with Tay.
He's in right now.
Okay, good.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
Okay, 10 minutes?
But
There's
10 minutes.
amazing stories on.
Can we
20
take
10
a
minutes?
5-minute break?
Yeah, let's take
Well, no,
a.
he's doing right now,
Oh,
because he's.
There he is.
There he is.
I'm glad you could do this.
Yes,
We're just hopping back and forth.
no problem, glad to have you here.
No rest for the weary.
Yes.
I think Commissioner Fitch might join as well. We have Kate from CGF.
Great.
Oh, well, wait.
We're gonna pop.
Yes.
Go catch.
Well,
No, he's
Commissioner,
dead. Yes,
people are gonna start talking, you spend so much time with us.
I know,
Yes.
it's scandalous.
Yes, it is. Well, welcome, Commissioner Winters, glad to have you here. Commissioner Fitz, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And, I guess we're gonna talk a little bit, about the armory, the Waterbury Armory.
Sure.
So, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Chris Winters. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families. I understand that you've heard from the National Guard
Yep.
and BGS already about this property. And this is kind of a synergy moment where we were looking for some additional shelter capacity across the state in anticipation of the ending of the June cohort on April 1st. I understand there is a bill, that's coming over to the Senate that might shift that date, but either way, we need to be prepared to have additional shelter capacity. And in looking at the armory, there's potential there to set up a 40-bed shelter. Just state up front that it's what you might consider congregate. That's not best practice, not ideal, but we would really have to put all options on the table right now. In looking at properties across the state, we can build additional shelter capacity. We have $4 million in the BAA to do this in 5 communities across the state, where we've seen the greatest impact of homelessness. So we're looking at Bennington, Brattleboro, Rutland, Burlington, and Central Vermont, and this armory fills some of that Central Vermont need. So we're hopeful that we can get something stood up by April 1st with a lot of assistance from our friends at BGS, perhaps with the National Guard as well, for fit up. And then longer term, I think as you've already heard, having that armory be a state asset is something that the state overall is interested in, perhaps for other uses in the future.
How many people are we housing now?
So there are 1,667 households in our GA housing program right now across the state. That's for folks who are in there through Act 81, the June cohort. That number is about 627 households. There's also what we call adverse weather conditions. So during the colder time of the year, more people are eligible to come indoors for shelter. We have 874 households in adverse weather. And then we have general categorical eligibility in the categories that we call vulnerable and catastrophic. So for a variety of reasons, people might qualify for housing for either 28 or 84 days. We have 166 households in that category right now. And that's outside of our traditional shelter system. Vermont is what you call a shelter first state. So we offer someone a shelter bed first. If those shelter beds are full, then we go to the emergency housing through the general assistance housing program. We had just recently, we were somewhere around 480 shelter beds statewide, and you might
These are run by Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, COTS, Spectrum, Good Samaritan, Haven, Upper Valley, Haven, Groundworks, all across the state. Brock is, and actually there's not a lot going on in regard to those shelters, but we had about 480 of those recently. We're now up to 530, so we're trying to expand the number of traditional shelters across the state. And we have about 100 more in the pipeline for the next year. So you'll see a line item in the budget for $7.2 million for about 180 total expanded shelter beds, operating those ongoing. So that'll be in the base going forward. So this is part of our overall shelter strategy. One of the things that we're really trying to achieve is less reliance on the hotels and motels. With this many rooms, we're using as many rooms as we possibly can. We're actually turning some people away beyond the 667 that we have. There's no real incentive for them to negotiate with us. They don't always follow health standards. The services and supports that people experiencing homelessness need are not provided, at least not in an adequate way in hotels. So we really prefer the traditional shelter system. So we're trying to expand that.
I guess that was where my question would be go next is, and I think you just kind of answered it. If you could elaborate a little bit more on it, if you would. Are we allowed to even have real conversations with some of these folks that we're actually putting up into these shelters and helping them as best we can? Are we allowed to help them find ways not to be homeless anymore? Are we allowed to offer them programs where they might be part of and join these programs and to find alternatives to better lifestyles? I don't realize that some of them are experiencing situations that are probably beyond their repair, but are we allowed to help them in any way?
We try as much as we can. The cohort is required to engage with us, so that's part of Act 81 that passed. So those 627 households are required. When you're in a shelter, you're going to have those services. You're going to have access to housing opportunities and housing navigation and assistance, substance use, mental health, healthcare, all the things that you complicated individuals might need in a shelter. In the hotels outside of the cohort, none of those folks are required to engage with us. So we have mixed success in reaching them and helping them. So it's running a social program through a for-profit private hotel. It just doesn't work well. And that's why we're trying to move away from it. There will always be a need for some hotel rooms, like through adverse weather and things like that. Sometimes more appropriate for families or people fleeing domestic violence. Sometimes the hotel is appropriate, but in large part, we try to move away from that so that we can provide services, get people to more permanent situations, and give the supports and services they need.
Yeah, I guess the staggering overall statistics that you hear, and I don't know that we've had anybody in here testifying. I don't know that we really want to get right down to the weeds of it here today, but the staggering numbers of what we're hearing for deaths and overdoses and some of those places that the folks are being housed, namely the hotels, are kind of scary. And I don't think that a lot of people will argue that we want to offer our support, but if to continue on a path where we're not helping these people better their lives, it's pretty hard to ask the taxpayer to keep on funding those types of situations for sure. And I think myself personally, when I hear of first of all, I believe that this building can serve many roles through the life of the time that the state owns it, meaning the Waterbury complex for anybody who might be listening. I think that to be able to have these folks in there and be able to offer them programming and services and to be quite honest, make sure that it's not an open air drug market or anything of that behavior or anything else that can happen bad that might be happening in other places. I just think it's a lot easier to ask the taxpayer to put a bill when at the end of the day we're producing better humans in that situation. not to go on that type of rant, but, you know, at some point in time, the taxpayer does need to understand, what it's costing to house these folks, and I think that, a better outcome, and making, and helping these people become, to better their situations is always a better answer.
Thank you. I will just mention that there is in the BAA, there's a price cap bill to reduce the rate of the hotels to $75 per night. On average, we're paying $132 right now. It's very expensive for the kind of, services that are not being provided, the conditions of some of these hotels. As I said, they've had no real incentive to negotiate with us. We are seeing this have an impact. We've had some hotels come forward. Our partners at BGS are helping us negotiate some of those rates. Some hotels are coming forward saying, sure, we'll do the 75, that's reasonable. Others are saying, you know, we may potentially withdraw, and others are saying, can we talk about a different deal? Like maybe a longer term deal that guarantees more occupancy, but at a lower rate. So I think we're having a much better conversation with them now than we have been because of the cap bill that's out there.
For sure. I'm hearing a little grumblings that maybe, the first conversations we've had with Waterbury, there are some concerns on that. Are we navigating through those conversations, to where the people in Waterbury are having a better understanding of what we're gonna do with this building?
So, you know, as soon as we made this pivot, and it was very recently that we did, to say that this is a potential use for a temporary shelter, and that with the state purchase, that we could use it for that. We contacted the Waterbury town manager and the select board. When it became public, as in the budget, and we testified in Senate appropriations. I reached out again. I got to the Waterbury Select Board meeting on Monday. And I'm one who really appreciates a lot of civic engagement. There were 100 people in that room and 100 more online, and they had a lot of really tough questions. People are worried. They don't trust the state in some ways. When we come in and say we're doing something temporarily, they wonder if it's going to be temporary or it's going to be longer than that. So I will just say that we are looking at this starting April 1st. It's currently budgeted for 3 months. We have to see how that goes. I wouldn't ever say that we wouldn't go beyond July 1st, and I didn't say that in the meeting Monday night either. But I did commit to, if we had any longer term programs for the temporary shelter, temporary it will be, aren't exactly sure of how long yet, that we would come back to the community and re-engage them there. Of course, the state will have other plans for that. It's an asset that could be used in a variety of ways. I think you heard from the commissioner on that, or that, you know, the state may choose to sell at some point, but that's yet to be determined. I think we've had the initial engagement with the town. They'll have a lot of questions about this. They have concerns about increased traffic up that road, safety and security. What are the rules around this shelter? Who's going to be in this shelter? There's a community fairly nearby. It sits up by itself on the end of a road, but there's a road that kind of goes through some housing. So lots of concerns, and I think still lots of engagement to happen and questions to be answered. But we came out and spoke to the community. I came out in person and spoke to the community, and I think they appreciated that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will just mention that the delegation in Rutland, which included representatives and senators, had a tour of what was in the old days the Holiday Inn. It renamed it, and that's where the majority of the homeless folks are. There's another hotel right up the street. So one of them's in Rutland Town, one's in Rutland City. And if I said that the situation there was dire, I would be underestimating what I saw there that day. It was just very, very troubling. Mold an inch thick on the walls, behind the Coke machine, doors that are just open all the time. It's just not a good situation. So I don't think there's anyone that can argue that what we're doing now with that particular segment is not working. It's not the answer.
I think some will argue, but you're right. I mean.
Well,
yeah,
maybe they would, but
right.
I would invite them to take a tour.
Right.
And this was one, by the way, that was well announced ahead of time. And the owner of the place was there, and you would have thought if somebody was gonna kind of mitigate the situation. They had a couple of days to do that, and apparently they didn't really take time or trouble to do much of anything. I mean, the doors were supposed to be locked all the time unless you were living there, and they were wide open for people to just walk in and out all day. Anyway, we asked a question about services being available, and it was, no, they're not. I mean, if they call, they can have people come in, but many times, quite understandably, the staff that works with them doesn't want to necessarily come into that particular environment. It's much better if that person were to leave and see them at their office. So again, that's a dead end to me. It just, and I know it's gonna go until April 30th, I think right now, unless something's changed.
April first is
First,
what anyone says, yeah, I think in the BAA is a proposal.
So there'll be maybe a bit of an overlap if we extend it a couple more weeks, or you have a little bit more trouble opening up Waterbury by April 1. But it's refreshing to hear that one of the main concerns that DCF has is to provide them with some services to change behavior. And I don't think there's any way around that. So I applaud what you're doing. I think and I understand people in Waterbury too being, legitimately concerned about what the impact on that particular community could be. But I don't know that there's any other solution. We can't just close all the doors and say, good luck, folks.
Senator, thank you for that. I've been to both the Cortina and to the Quality Inn and a couple of other smaller motels and a couple of times. And the conditions are not great. That's one of the challenges that we have with a private entity.
Yeah.
Operating a hotel for profit, for folks who, are really in some desperate situations.
Yeah.
Some people would say that it's better than nothing. In some ways, it does provide folks with stability and a locked door, where other options don't always show that. But what we are trying to do is move away from that model, because we know it's not the most effective to move toward our traditional shelter system that has services. And we're actively seeking provider and buildings in the shelter system in Rutland as well. Something in all these areas. We are looking at an option for a mobile shelter unit in Rutland, and working with the mayor, working with Brock, and exchanging with some others down there, to try to see what's possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Rural Caucus this morning talked with a number of healthcare providers. And if I heard correctly, 10% of the rooms at the Rutland Hospital are for people who don't have homes. The residents, literally residents in the hospital, don't have anywhere to go. So the hospital is not released. They do not need medical care. Other care, they don't need medical care, but already been there over 600 days. The person's been there 130 days. And I just want to make sure that you're capturing hospital residents in those initial numbers that you gave us. And if you aren't, there's a few more to be added.
Yeah, it's definitely not in these numbers. I wonder, I don't know for sure. I can get back to you on whether those folks are counted among those who are unhoused right now. Vermont does a pretty good job of sheltering everybody who is homeless. So we do a pretty good job with our counts. We have a fairly accurate picture of who's homeless in the state of Vermont. But I will check and see if that hospital count, those numbers are already.
Yeah, because those are other folks who, general details were given about a number of situations. And it was often, they have family, but the family can't handle their needs, which are not medical needs.
Say 10%.
10% of patients.
Did they use the word respite care?
No.
Okay,
No,
so that's
no,
another
they said
category.
residents, absolutely
Okay.
residents, because respite, you need some sort of medical care, right?
Sometimes
Whether
really
it's
it's
or
just
not.
rest,
Yeah, no, these are.
like a nurse can
For
come in
some
once a
reason
day.
have mental health or other issues that, there's no place for them, right? There's not enough elder care in beds, right? So yeah, they need housing away from any family that they may or may not have. It was just not for people. That we really don't have places for, and yet for a hospital to be buried, I get that, we all pay for that. Probably in a more expensive way than you're gonna find.
Sure.
So, sorry about that, but again, stuff.
No, that's
It's an important
important.
population, not forget that, because of every hospital, we have 40.
Oh, yeah.
Every hospital in Vermont has some subset of homeless living there.
And
That's
these,
just
and
more
these
people.
respite beds are
That's-
needed too.
Sure.
No, we have a housing crisis in our state and, you know, serving the Economic Development Housing Committee, we talked about this for a year and a half. We did actually put in a, provision that towns can't, they have to allow shelters, to be there.
That's
And-
right.
And so that has changed since last year. I think it is important to work with the town and, just have full communication. So they understand, so that the residents understand, the residents of the shelter. This particular one is not ideal, as I think you've said, as a shelter. I think it is a valuable building to the state. But it's not, it's like warehousing and that's not good. So I hope you're still looking for better, opportunities near Waterbury. You may ask that, if they don't want it here.
We are,
Give us-
yeah, we are constantly exploring other opportunities. We did have something else in Montpelier that fell through that kind of caused us to think more seriously about Waterbury as the central Vermont option. We're still looking at things in Montpelier, Barry, Berlin. But thank you for reminding me that I've gone this far without saying one of the most effective things that we can do to address homelessness in the state is creating more affordable housing. And you know,
Right.
Commissioner Farrell and others are promoting this package to really try to speed up reasonable reforms to Act 250 local zoning and encourage development and allow for things like homeless shelters and conversion of hotels. That's another really effective thing that we can do, is to convert some of these hotels and motels first into shelter and then longer term into affordable housing.
And
And we've
supported
done-
housing.
And supported
Yeah.
housing, yep, with the services wrapped around. It's
With the caveat that these folks need to be participants of trying to better their lives.
And many of them have jobs. Many of
Oh,
them
I'm not
have
saying that.
multiple
I'm not
jobs.
saying that they don't, it's just the
No, but that's
the
a,
law in it, I mean, it's just.
but a misconception is that they don't have jobs.
Right.
And they're much more often victims of crime than they are perpetrators
You
of
get
crime.
that,
And many of them are children.
yeah, I absolutely
and
get that,
It's,
and then, you know, we just wanna make sure that they're,
I think many of them generally are trying to better their lives. But that's obviously a long conversation.
Yeah, having met and talked to a lot of people in the hotels, and there is that misperception that they're from somewhere else. They're not. They're from Vermont. They're your friends and neighbors and people that you know. A lot of them do have jobs. A lot of them do have like a voucher or a subsidy that would allow them to move into a unit if there was a unit available. And we just don't have a lot of families with children, a lot of folks with disabilities, some older workers.
Right, so we are increasing housing. It takes a while. But that is the goal. There's one other thing. I'm glad you have more in the pipeline. So just, you know, whatever we can do, we really need support and services for folks too.
Yep.
So that they can get past this. And just actually one other thing, it has been the case that the biggest financial bad event that people have is medical debt and not being able to pay medical debt, and then they lose their house. That can happen to anyone. I don't know if that's still the case or if you track that at all, but
I know this is an issue. And Senator Harrison, I should mention, one of the projects that we're really excited about as part of this temporary solution is the Winston Growdy.
yes,
They have some dorms from the Austin school that were unused, so that's one of the projects that we're supporting. That can house up to, I think, 40 individuals, 20 rooms, up to 40 individuals, perfect for families. They've got a lot of supports and services right on site there.
there's transit to it
Yeah,
already.
we're very excited about it.
Yeah, thank you.
anything else, just?
Yeah, I think, sure. Vermont Buyers College has buildings for sale. Are we looking into those as well as the state?
I think that's probably, we're looking high and low. We're searching all over the place and looking for options. One of the challenges, as you might imagine, is community support.
Sure.
So if you were to look at an area like that, I imagine there would be some people would have something to say about that. That's always a challenge. We had to have something in the St. Johnsbury area that took a year and a half plus, I think, until the Home Act passed, and that S-100 allowed that to go through. In Memorial County, There was a shelter in Hyde Park that a neighbor held up for over a year. It's finally opening. So it's always challenging to find the right building, the right location, the community support, and then the workforce to run those shelters.
Well, I don't think that you're gonna have, getting back to Waterbury, I don't think you're gonna have much opposition in this committee. I think we've all talked about it quite well, and we like the idea. We like the idea of the building in itself, the versatility of the building, where the location and all that, and we like your idea as far as what you're trying to do, and anything else for the commissioners, before we let them go?
Yeah, I just wouldn't say I like this as a shelter.
Yeah.
I can't say.
But I don't think that you're opposed to the sale of the building,
No,
to
I'm
BGS.
fine with those
which-
fine
Which I was getting
But
at.
this is not good as a shelter, but
We'll just say it's, one piece of a very large puzzle and it's a temporary solution and we're just trying to put all options on the table.
yes.
And I don't, and I think, well, I won't add any mix to the fire. And we like the word temporary and, but we support the sale of the building, which is what we're here for as far as this committee, and unless there's anything else from my
Wish you
committee,
all the
we're
best.
gonna,
Thank you.
let these
Appreciate it.
people go. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. I don't get to go into this committee very often.
Yeah, well, it's,
Well, it's always a pleasure.
good to see you and thank you for.
You have an excellent partner in BGS.